Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas Armstrong, and I'm making a series of short videos to introduce my new book, The Power of Neurodiversity: Unleashing the Advantages of Your Neurodivergent Brain. This is a completely revised and updated second edition of a book that I originally wrote in 2010. The topic of today's video is Enhancing Social Networks for Autism. In another video, I talked about positive niche construction, which is a way of organizing the environment for neurodivergent individuals. And it consists of 8 components, including being aware of your strengths, having positive role models around you, using assistive technology tools, and so on. But one of my components is called enhanced human networks. This is based on the idea that everyone exists in the midst of a social system of friends and relatives and enemies and bullies and teachers and therapists, all kinds of people. And some of these relationships are positive and some of them are negative. Some of them are neutral. But the idea here is to enhance the human network that you're in. And that could be by getting rid of the negative connections or working them out. If it happens to be a child in the classroom, getting along with their teacher better. Or it could be strengthening the positive connections. So that's the sense in which this video is couched. I want to talk about enhanced human networks in terms specifically of autism. And I want to preface I'm going to give some specific ways of enhancing social networks. But before I do that, I want to talk about probably the most prevalent way in which people have tried to socialize, quote unquote, kids on the spectrum. And this is the applied behavior analysis approach, or ABA. And I want to go on record saying that I do not recommend ABA for parents or teachers to use with kids on the spectrum. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, but among which are the idea that kids may improve. And the people who support this approach say, well, look at the research. You know, it's got the best research of any intervention for autism. And I say, well, that may well be true, but they're just collecting statistics based upon behaviors. And kids in ABA do begin to behave better as a result of the treatment. But let's look at why they're behaving better. They're behaving better to get treats. They want to get treats. They want to, get rewarded for whatever they're doing. But they're not doing the activity out of a social impulse or as a way of communicating better. So I think that makes this approach rather artificial. It's really based on the psychologist B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning model, which was very popular in the 1950s, but was soon displaced by the cognitive therapy approach to the human personality. So a no on ABA in general. I mean, they're everywhere. There's over 3,000 ABA centers in the United States alone. So, and I noticed I was going on some neurodiversity chat sites on Facebook, and I was happy to see that it said that if you like ABA, find somebody else, find some other group to join. So it's good that feeling is spreading. And I know in Neurotribes, Steve Silberman talked about ABA and about its beginnings and so forth. And I give you that as a recommendation to read as well. What I would recommend as an alternative to ABA is an approach called DIR Floortime. developed by a Canadian psychologist, Stanley Greenspan, and his colleague, and well, actually several colleagues. And the short term for this is floor time. The magic of floor time is that it's based on play, on free play. And the second piece of magic is that it's child-centered. It's not trying to manipulate the child with rewards and stickers and that kind of thing. Rather, the parent or therapist or teacher is told to simply look for opportunities, look for inroads, when the child seems open for a social interaction. It may be something that happens at random, but that's the opportunity to take it and respond to it in a spontaneous and fresh way. And by doing that, that draws the individual child out and creates social connections that may be sporadic at first, but over time, if this activity is done several times a day, for example, it can really create a social enhancement of that child's interpersonal life. Another approach that's been successfully used is animal therapy. Now, this rather expands the notion of social. We think of social in terms of people, but why not animals too? We can be social with animals. In fact, animals, dogs are very social people. Well, canines. And the reason it works so well with kids on the spectrum is that dogs and other animals like horses aren't mysteries. You're not trying to figure out, like with a human being, what do they have in mind? What are they thinking? You see what you see, you get from a dog. If they're affectionate, they show the affection. If you did something they don't like, they'll show you that directly. So there's an automatic feedback loop going on that strengthens a child's social connections and their ability to respond and communicate. And another thing that is workable or that is favorable for animal therapy has to do with one of the strengths of autism, and that is their sensitive sensory sensitivities. This is often looked on as a negative, having to be protected from, being hugged or loud sounds, that kind of thing. But we should look at the other end of that, and that is when the child is in control or the adult is in control of the stimulation, it can be a great source of pleasure. In fact, autistic people are more sensitive to nature than neurotypical people are. And I see that as a clear advantage just in terms of everyday living. So, animals are great sensory sources that, they're furry, you can touch them, you can pet them. They're just fun to be with, and you get lots of good, positive sensory input from them. Another approach is play therapy. And this is usually in the context of working with a certified play therapist who's often a clinical psychologist or a marriage and family counselor or a licensed clinical social worker or even a psychiatrist. My wife, my ex-wife, I should say, we've not been together now for almost 10 years, but we're still friends. And she is a sandplay therapist and has been for the last 35 years. This is her sandplay room, and you see the sand box right there in the middle, and all these figurines. She's collected thousands of them from around the world. And the way this works is that the child is given minimal direction. They're simply told to build a world, anything they'd like to do using any of the items that they want to pick. And so they go to work. And the nice thing about this is the therapist leaves them alone. The therapist isn't there trying to draw them out, trying to get them to talk, that kind of thing. they create a world, and that world is often a social world. There are a lot of people among those figurines, and they can create, all kinds of things that bring up their own unconscious fears, maybe about other people, their fears about overstimulation, about communication, and so on. And this can be a way of working out those types of conflicts. Another important social niche for autism, I think, is interaction with smart robots. Here, for example, is a QT robot called an Autism Robot for Improving Your Child's Learning Outcome at Home from Lux AI. So yes, this is an artificially intelligent robot who is capable of responding to lots of different social cues. And the child interacts with this robot not just through computers, but also directly as well. And so this makes use of another strength of autism, which is their quality of being systemizers. They're fascinated with systems, and a robot is a system with fixed inputs and outputs. And so, they're able to manipulate this social robot and at the same time learn social skills that they may not have learned up till then. So it helps them. This is a good example of what I call strength-based learning strategies, where you take something that the child needs to learn, in this case, social skills, using something that they do really well, and that is interacting with systems, with predictable systems, essentially. Another positive niche for autism is conferences and get-togethers. I should point out that the birth of neurodiversity occurred at a conference in 1993 when Jim Sinclair, pictured here, gave his famous "Don't Mourn for Us" speech. And later on, Jim Sinclair founded Autreat, which was the first retreat get-together for autistic people. Neurotypicals were not welcome, as far as I'm understanding. And in fact, this autreat has spawned many other similar get-togethers where autistic people meet other autistic people or people with autism. I'm not too politically correct about any of that. But the important point is that actually the research suggests that autistic people or people with autism relate better to autistic people or people with autism than they do with neurotypicals. So, why do we, it's called the double empathy problem. Why do we have such a fit about people with autism not being able to communicate well with us, neurotypicals, and we don't complain about our inability to communicate with them? So, it's an interesting issue, and it suggests that any kind of activity that brings together autistic people or people with autism suggests that this is going to be a win-win situation for everybody. Another approach is online connections. In fact, the neurodiversity movement was largely spearheaded by interactions on the internet. It was timed beautifully to coincide with the rise of the internet. And the thing about the internet is that it makes things much easier for many people on the autistic spectrum to communicate because you don't have the subverbal cues and the body just language and all the kind of things that you have to read that many people with autism have so much trouble deciphering. And so people were able to communicate, to get together quickly and easily on chat sites and in Facebook groups and online communities and so forth. And that really, brought what Jim Sinclair what he sparked. It really sparked a revolution that the internet was a big part of. Now, I don't have a specific recommendation for this site, but I did notice it online called Hickey, Hiki. I don't know if that's a reference to, making out and getting a hickey or what it is. It probably stands for something. I'm sorry. At any rate, um, it's a online community for people with autism and ADHD and other forms of neurodivergence. And, they've built in, I'm assuming, confidentiality and security and so forth as a way of connecting with other people who think and act and behave like you do. And finally, I might be getting myself out on a limb here, but I'm going to take the chance and recommend facilitated communication as a positive social niche for autism. I had the privilege a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, of hearing and meeting Adam Morgan of the Adam Morgan Foundation in St. Louis. Adam, at the time I met him, was about 16, 17 years of age, and he did not communicate with others in any kind of neurotypical way. He communicated through um, facilitated communication through a computer. Um, he said his life changed when he was 10 and his mother gave him a laptop, or no, it was a tablet, I think, and, and someone obviously to help him, to guide him along. And from that time on, he just started going to town. He graduated from high school, took the Regents exam, is now at a university in St. Louis, and he has his own website. He's really doing a lot, and he rails against the fact that the neurotypical community considers this unscientific. On his website, he has a couple of letters to the American Speech and Hearing Association who have suggested that it's harmful to engage in facilitative communication. And he says, how do they have the audacity to choose a preferred method of communication? Shouldn't we have the freedom to communicate in the way that works best for us? And that really made a lot of sense to me. And so I've included it here as one of the positive niches. And this book he wrote a chapter in this book called Leaders Around Me, Autobiographies of Autistics Who Type, Point, and Spell to Communicate. And there's many stories in here that are also very positive signs that this is um, a excellent way to communicate, failing other methods. So that's a little bit about the enhanced social niches or networks that can be created or can be increased in use to help people who are neurodiverse and who are in particular autistic or diagnosed with autism. Let me say that. I often feel on safe ground when I say diagnosed with autism. Even though it has a clinical feel to it, it suggests a real truth that a social event occurred where a doctor diagnosed this person with autism. And so, there's a little sociologist in me that says, that may be a more accurate way of saying things. But I know there's a lot of identity politics in the neurodiversity movement. And so I will tread very lightly on this and just say, I hope you get my book, The Power of Neurodiversity, Unleashing the Advantages of Your Neurodivergent Brain, completely revised and updated second edition. If you want to get my blog posts, sign up on my homepage of my website and you will receive a 200-item neurodiversity strengths checklist. And you can go to my website, which is at www.institute4learning.com. That's institute4learning.com. I want to thank you again for listening, for hearing what I have to say. You may not agree with everything I said, but maybe you got some ideas, some thoughts about a few of the strategies or interventions that I suggested. At any rate, I want to thank you all and wish you, wherever you are, a wonderful, healthy, healing experience as you realize your full potential and the full potential of the neurodivergent people around you. Thanks so much.